You've heard all the names, right? Snowflakes, fragile, screen addicted, allergic to hard work. It seems like Generation Z has become the favorite punchline for pretty much every older generation's frustrations. But what if we've got it all wrong? What if those labels aren't accurate descriptions at all? What if they're just profound misunderstandings? What if the behavior that looks like weakness from the outside is actually a survival strategy from the inside?
All right, that's what we're going to get into here. Think of this less like putting a generation on trial and more like a diagnosis. We're trying to get to the why of it all, to really understand the forces that have shaped them.
Because, you can't understand a plant by just staring at its leaves. You have to look at the soil it grew in. And for Gen Z, that soil, the environment that shaped their minds, their hopes, their fears, is radically different from anything that's come before.
So let's start with the most obvious part of that soil, the digital world. I mean, this is the first generation in history to grow up not just with the internet, but literally inside of it. There's this incredible concept in neuroscience called neuroplasticity. It just means that our brains physically change. They literally rewire themselves to adapt to the environment we live in. And for Gen Z, that environment was a little glowing rectangle in their pocket, an environment where notifications and pings often showed up long before they even learned the words for their own feelings. And that leads to one of the biggest myths out there, the whole 8-second attention span thing. But the reality is way more interesting. Their attention isn't shorter, it's just faster and way more selective. When you process thousands of posts a day, you get incredibly good at filtering out junk. It's not a bug, it's a feature. It's a highly evolved BS filter, and it's a survival skill. But of course, that adaptation comes at a cost. Social media apps are literally designed like slot machines, feeding our brains these tiny, unpredictable rewards, little dopamine hits that keep us scrolling. This trains the brain to exist in a state of continuous partial attention. It never fully rests, never fully logs off, and the end result of that? Neurological exhaustion. It's that bizarre modern feeling of being totally overstimulated and yet somehow completely empty at the same time. Now, that digital burnout isn't happening in a vacuum. Let's dig into the next layer of soil, the economy. This generation didn't just inherit smartphones. They inherited a broken economic contract, where the old rules for success just don't seem to apply anymore. To really get their response to this, you have to understand a psychological concept called locus of control. It sounds fancy, but it's simple. It's about where you believe the control in your life is. Do you feel like you're in the driver's seat, or do you feel like outside forces are at the wheel? And this is where you see a huge generational shift. For boomers, the economy largely rewarded hard work. That fosters an internal locus of control, the belief that I am in charge of my destiny. But Gen Z? They watched their parents lose their homes in 2008. They saw student debt explode, and they walked into the job market during a global pandemic. Their world taught them that huge outside forces can derail everything. That fosters an external locus of control.
And this is so crucial. What older generations often call laziness or a lack of ambition, psychology has another name for: learned helplessness. It's not a character flaw. It's a completely rational adaptation to a system that repeatedly shows you that your hard work doesn't always pay off.
I mean, this quote just hits the nail on the head, doesn't it? Why would you sacrifice your entire 20s, burning yourself out for a company that talks about family, but then fires people with a cold, impersonal email? That trust is just broken. It's not that hope died, it just became a calculated risk.
Which brings us to our third layer of soil, the social world. And here's the great paradox. Gen Z is the most digitally connected generation in human history, and yet they're statistically the loneliest. How is that even possible? While a big piece of the puzzle is this idea of parasocial relationships. A teenager can spend hours every day with a streamer, feeling like they truly know them. Their brain is even releasing oxytocin, the bonding hormone. But it's a one-way street. It's an intimacy simulation. It's warm and it's vivid, but ultimately, it's not a real connection.
And that's the trade-off, isn't it? Digital interaction feels safe. It's clean, you can edit your response, curate your identity. But real, face-to-face human connection, it's messy, it's unpredictable. It requires you to be vulnerable. And when you spend too much time in the safe digital world, your muscles for dealing with the messy real world, they start to get weak.
This also explains the rise of so-called therapy speak. In homes where parents were overworked and just emotionally exhausted, there was often no space to talk about difficult feelings. So words like boundaries and triggers didn't pop up because a generation is being dramatic. They emerged because they finally gave a name and a language to feelings that for a long time had no witnesses. So when you put it all together, this soil made of algorithms, economic anxiety, and profound loneliness, it's really no surprise that Gen Z is coming up with a completely new definition of what it even means to be strong. This is the absolute core of it. For past generations, resilience was about a clenched jaw, about enduring hardship in silence. For Gen Z, resilience is the emotional courage to be vulnerable. It's the strength to actually say, "I'm not okay," and to ask for help. The battlefield has moved from the outside world into our own nervous systems. And if you redefine strength, well, you have to redefine success too. It's not about the corner office anymore. Look at these new metrics for a successful life. A calm nervous system, a handful of real, honest friendships, work that lets you be yourself. It's about choosing to rest instead of constantly performing, and choosing therapy instead of just pretending everything is fine. And let's be absolutely crystal clear on this point. This is not a rejection of work itself. It is a fundamental rejection of work that lacks dignity, meaning, and basic respect for the human being who is doing it. So maybe when we step back and look at the big picture, we see that Gen Z isn't a symptom of a world in decline. Maybe they're the sensors. They're the canaries in the coal mine, feeling the effects of a rapidly changing world more intensely than anyone else. Which leaves us with this final thought. Perhaps the question we should be asking isn't what's wrong with Gen Z, but rather, what is their anxiety, their burnout, and their loneliness trying to warn us about? Their discomfort might just be a reflection of the deep cracks in our society, and maybe it's an invitation for all of us to start building something better.